I'm Rick Fleeter, and SpacePoint is a company. It's a little bit of a hobby for me and for my ex-students that we a little. It's a hobby that has gotten a little bit out of hand. We started it 6 years ago, based on a fairly simple premise. But before I get into that, let me just say that the previous two Secesas, I came and gave a paper like a normal professor on the work that we were doing, on the research we were doing, and the idea was, okay, we'll do this one the same way. But really, at this point, we're not really doing research that I could turn into a paper. We really have a product now, and we're trying to get people to use it. So for that reason, I didn't want to submit a paper, and the organizers were nice enough to give me this slot early in the morning to do a quick demo of what we're doing. So, okay, having sort of put the context on it, the thesis of the company is really summarized in a little pie chart, but maybe it's not that obvious. What I found working as a systems engineer for 20, 25 years, and then now I teach that for the last 15 years, is if you look at how engineers are spending their time on design, it's about equally divided in three parts. Two of which we think about a lot, which is analysis and design, and one of which we don't think really about at all as an engineering function, which is what I call shopping. Just looking for components, all those catalogs we used to have on the bookshelves, and now everybody, one of the things that really frustrates me about my students, I'm at a big university, there's all these resources available. How do they do research? They go to Google and they Google it. And unfortunately, we as engineers have a tendency to do the same thing when we're doing design. But really, when you Google magnetic torque coil, hysteresis rod, damper, you're not going to find, you'd be lucky to find anything, let alone a whole list of things that you can then trade off and decide. My thesis is that about a third of our time is spent shopping. And as I sort of wrote down, we put a lot of emphasis into automating design and a lot of emphasis into automating analysis and no emphasis into automating shopping. So this was the thesis of the company. We'll automate the process of shopping, which seems really, okay, maybe a little bit banale, a little bit ordinary. But in fact, there's quite a bit of engineering also in shopping. Because when you want to shop fairly specifically for specifications. Okay, the obvious specification is less than a certain amount of power, less than a certain amount of mass, manufactured in the EU, outside the EU, not in America, in America. Since I work in both countries, when you're in America, you're always searching for things that are in America. When you're in the rest of the world, you don't want things that are in America because they're ITAR controlled. It's a hassle. Or maybe you want to buy them within the country that you're in. So just finding the vendors is sometimes not that easy. And then individual components have their own specifications. The various specifications for a star tracker don't look very much like the specifications for a valve for a rocket engine. So once you get deeper into what we call detailed shopping, you need a set of specifications specific to every category of component. So that managed to keep the five of us, fairly busy for all this time until about 2.5, 3 years ago when we got the system working. First, we got it working as a browser. So you go to our website, you log in, and I have, if I can, close this. I have a series of 4 short videos, like a minute. Eladia, can you help me? Eladia. Ho perso la deve essere qui. Ok, questo sarebbe Fleeter. Ok, scusi. So okay. Okay, I also have on the line with me one of my partners from SpacePoint, Enrico Stefanini, because I'm not really what you would call an Italian in informatica, and he is. So questions having to do with the details of how this all works from an information science point of view are really his category, and things that have to do with the aerospace engineering side, more mine. This video is just our old login to the website. And what we're doing, the reason we did this was to avoid a problem with the internet during the short time that I have to make the presentation. So the operator is searching in the attitude control systems, and he chose AOCS and then specifically accelerometer, and he's going to plug in just one value to narrow the search, which is a maximum power of 0.15 watts. And then you can decide on the space qualification level, in fact, we have two different space qualification levels, one that we invented called SQL, which is the one he pulled up, and then we have the regular technical TRL. So once you do that and you press execute, you get this long list of possible suppliers. Each one of their components, you can click on any one of them and immediately bring up the data sheet. What he's going to do now, just read the data sheet, and then you can download it. And that was our first version of the product. And actually, that's the version that all my students use. Is, you know, the first thing they ask you about, you think you're going through class, you're teaching them all this complicated stuff. Do they ever ask you a question about stabilization and control? No, they ask you, where do I find an S-band radio? So partly I wanted to automate it just to save myself work. So the students typically do this, and they do their shopping through a web browser, and I just have these two demos of the web browser. Sure, hold on, because it keeps repeating the video, so. Okay, there we go. Okay. The next video is basically the same operation, only to show one particular point. If you click on the search detailed instead of search, whatever we call it, what is it called? High level. Everything is the same until you get, actually this seems like, what do I care? But to us it was a lot of work. In this case we picked communication systems, detectors, and you bring up a lot of them because he didn't specify anything more other than radio systems detectors. So in this case, he's going to specify just one vendor. Then you can narrow the search to everything that one vendor makes. And let me just let this run for a second. Okay, now it's narrowed down to just the vendor. Pick one component. When he picks the one component, what you're going to see, you can already see it up here, is all of the specifications relevant to radio detectors. So there would be noise temperature, sensitivity numbers, in addition to the regular general ones, so that when you do a detailed search, you can actually look at all the manufacturer specifications laid out in a spreadsheet, download the data sheet, etc. Okay, so that's where we were when we started out, though that wasn't really, okay, I'll roll this video just to make one more point. Which is another search that you don't always think about, but which is sometimes very handy to do, is you have a vendor in mind. Maybe they're a partner on the program, whatever it is. Sometimes you just want to find that vendor, particularly that vendor site in a particular company. So for that reason, we did the third mode of search besides high level, low level, is just to search vendors, and you can search for a vendor in a particular company. In this case, we picked Surrey, because SSTL is both in the UK and in the US, and we wanted to see what their products would be just in the US. So once he clicks through all the various things about the search and selects them, it brings you to the SSTL US site. So that was sort of the demo of the third mode of search. Okay. I'm going to skip through that. Okay, the last two videos are very short. And what they're here to illustrate was, I can talk through one of them. One is the high level, one is the low level. Otherwise, they look about the same. The ultimate goal of our project was not just to make a web browser where you could look for components. That requires the basic collecting 5,000, 6,000 components, doing all the database work that you need to do, writing down all the specifications, etc. But the objective was to integrate this with concurrent engineering. And that is a thing that we call web services. Web services is the link that's made between our server and your concurrent engineering facility. And what happens when you activate this is that it adds an additional spreadsheet to your existing stack of spreadsheets. You have a spreadsheet for propulsion, you have a spreadsheet for power, you have a spreadsheet for every one of the subsystems. You now have a spreadsheet for shopping. And that would be the space point. And that's what you're seeing on this slide. So while I was talking, I went through the various login steps, but very similar to what you do for the web sheet, for the browser version. And we did the exact same search in this case. The difference being that once you select it, you have all of the components downloaded into your concurrent engineering environment, so that you can, while you're doing your design, you could say, okay, I'd like to insert a real component, a real radio instead of a parameterized radio, a real solar panel, whatever the component is, and it inserts into your design all the relevant parameters, the size, the dimensions, the mass, and so on. So if I go to, sorry to be talking and showing at the same time. I'll try to restrain myself a little bit on this last one, just to say what he's doing. Okay, this is just the basic login. Selecting our host. And then when you get filter parameters, it activates the search window. Then you pretty much decide which subsystem you want to search for. In this case, comms. He's again going to search for a detector and get the same result that we got before. And then at any time, you can narrow the search the way we did before to just a certain vendor, if for some reason that's it. Or you can narrow the search to everything that consumes less than a watt, or everything that weighs less than a kilogram, or everything that's not built in America, or whatever you want to do. And what he's illustrating here, scrolling to the right, are all the various performances, the specifications that are not generic to everything in the database. Okay, so that is I'm going to stop it because it repeats the video several times. Okay. That is pretty much the demo. I wanted to finish completely on time. Maybe I overdid it. But at least I'd leave myself 5 minutes for questions, and then you guys need to change gears to get back into the regular conference mode. But the basic thesis of the company is that in the end, if you look at engineered devices, their performance is the direct proportionality to the performance of the components. If you look at, we always use these examples like a smartphone, but if you look at the smartphone, if you look at my little Samsung smartphone, Samsung doesn't build the screen, they don't build the cover glass, they don't build the processor, they don't build the battery, they don't build any of it. All they do is shop. And the better they do shopping for the video driver, the display, the cover glass, all these various things, the resulting mass, power consumption, and so on of the smartphone is all driven by the components that you find. Sharpening up the search for components is fairly important to making, especially with my students now, we work in CubeSats, and 1/10 of a watt is a big deal. 100 grams is way too much to even think about. So when you get down to worrying about 20 grams, 30 grams, everything you select is fairly important. It isn't good enough to have a parameterized model. You want to know exactly what that battery is going to weigh, each little cell. And so having a tool that allows you to fine-tune that and go immediately to every vendor and do serious shopping. I'll just say one more thing about the database. Everybody tells me, oh yeah, my company did that, or our institution did that. Everybody does it one time. The trouble is, it isn't good enough to do it one time because it's all different after a year. So we actually, one of the advantages of working in a school, 2 schools, is you can pay students to do things that you don't want to do yourself. Namely, go through 6,000 components every year, click on every link, and you'd be amazed how many of those links don't work after a year. And so it's a little bit like scrubbing your memory on a spacecraft. You have to cycle through, cycle through, cycle through. And then the vendors, a lot of times the link is broken because they have a new version, they change the model number by one. So it allows us to upgrade. And of course, users write us and say, Rick, this component that I used wasn't in your database, so we have a lot of feedback from people that helps us to add things that we didn't know about. The trouble with the database is it's capital equipment that requires a lot of maintenance. It's one thing to buy the piano, but then you got to tune it every year, and springs break and things like that. So it's the same thing with the database. It's one thing to create it. It's another thing to, month after month after month, keep it refreshed. So that's pretty much what we're doing now. Okay, thank you for your attention. If there's any questions, I've got a minute.
I was just wondering, two questions on one, is the web service interface, is that open? Can other tools connect to your web service interface?
Well, we work by subscription. So when you get the subscription, we send you a little package of software. Right. Yeah, it's running.
To do, let's say, programmatic
can you change it?
Software connection to it, rather than use your client.
Okay, I don't know, but I can ask Enrico. Ci stai? Hai capito la domanda? Lui voleva sapere se loro possono entrare nel database e cambiare un po' del software per customizzare il modo in cui funziona.
Okay. The only way to do it is customize the client of the web service, because we provide a service, and so we don't provide a system. If you want to customize the service, you have two ways. First is to do an a commercial agreement with us to provide you our software system, because we have the IPR of the software system. And second way is to specify us new requirements, your customized requirements, to provide, to let us, to allow us to modify the system for providing a service that you require. This is two possible ways. There is a third way. It's possible to that you can also customize the software of the client of the web service, because to get the service is possible by using a client, and our Excel client is only one of the possible web service client. I could provide you the specifications of our services, and for specifications mean that I have to provide you the interface of our web service. We are speaking of about 10 web services that all concur to get the data. So I have to provide you the specifications that are the parameters to call the service, and also the name of the function that allow you to get the data. And I have to provide you the address on the net of our service specification. If you see our Excel window to set the filter and to get the data, okay, all the data that are deployed on the window are the result of our web services. For example, the list of subsystems that are marked with red color, red because it's necessary to provide to our server these parameters. Okay, the list is the result of one of our web services.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Cindy. That was
Short
good.
answer is yes.
Okay, any other short question? Long answer?
Two very short questions. What does that service cost? Like, do you license that per company? Or?
Yeah, we license it per company. It's about 8,000 euros a year.
Okay.
We also discount it for universities, and then when you get it, you also get the client for the browser so that you can work offline, because many times you really want to just fiddle around offline before the actual chuff session.
And then the follow-up question to that, so what's the difference from what you provide to SatSearch, which does that for free?
What search?
Do you know SatSearch?
No.
It's a company which provides, I think, a similar service, and it's for free, so I just wanted to know if you...
No, but I should find out about it, because I don't know.
One question, Bernie Fuchs. Are you aware of the initiative of electronic data sheets, EDS, which is taking place in the framework of Secesa, which is trying to define a standard to exchange specification information about building blocks? If not, I would recommend...
No, we should, yeah. In fact, it's a big problem, because when you have a very large number of things in a database and they're all different, it's difficult to do search because everybody is listing their specifications in a different way. And that's been a problem of ours from the beginning. We have to actually re-engineer the specifications to make them all homogeneous.
So partly you also already explained how you keep the database updated, but do you have some collaboration or some with the vendors themselves? Are they interested in being in such a database?
Well, we don't, we try to keep the database kind of neutral. So we don't offer people, we ask them, we write letters, we explain emails, we explain what we're doing, we try to get them to respond. But the beginning is always the public information. So we take whatever information is public. Then if it's not enough or it's sufficient or whatever, we try to motivate them to be present in the database to provide us things. But we don't provide like a Google-type incentive where they could pay to get a better ranking or something like that. It's a totally neutral system. Is that kind of what you're asking, or?
Well, I was expecting that it's neutral, but do vendors collaborate?
With us? I would say yes. I mean, you never know what they're not telling you. And one of the things we originally started off wanting to have cost, and they did not want to have any cost information, so we took that out very early in the, but given that we don't provide cost, we haven't felt resistance. I think that, most people want to be as visible as possible with the components that they make, so long as you don't ask them for anything that they don't feel comfortable. When there are certain specifications they don't want to publish, they're absent in the database. You can't search for them for that vendor.
But they do not collaborate with that degree that they update or keep?
No, it's just too bad. Nobody writes to us and says, here's our new component. They could. We'd like them to do that. We encourage them to do that. But I would say on the whole, nobody does that. So it's left up to us to go to their site and investigate year after year what's new. We do also solicit on the site, if you don't find a component that you know exists or you don't find a vendor, to write us. I got started in this because I'm a swimmer and I used to travel all around the world and I was always looking for pools, and there's a pool finding service. And it's almost completely, it has thousands and thousands of pools. Colombo, Sri Lanka, there's a dozen pools listed there. And how did they get there? It was all because travelers like me would say, I was in this little town in Korea and I found this pool that's open at 7 in the morning. So, what's that? Crowdsourcing. So we're trying to do that. And our clients do write us, but the vendors don't. I mean, just broadly speaking. Okay.
Well, we finished in
time.
Yeah. Are you sure you still have time for a question? Because then we start at 9 to do the session. So, last question from Alain.
You spoke also about TRL.
About?
The TRL
Uh-huh.
of your components. Who put the value? You?
No, them. For TRL, the vendor tells us the TRL. We don't assess it. The SQL, that's really the heart of the difference, why we have two qualification levels. The SQL is our research. If we try to find out, did this component fly and did it work in space and for how long? So that we can write down, and we call that SQL, space qualification level. Instead, the TRL is a specification that's given to us pretty much by the vendor. And we just accept it, we don't research it. So that way you have two ways of looking at the qualification level. We can say, if you look at the SQL, it'll say flown in space, worked for a year. It'll even say flown in space, failed after a year. So we can really customize that without the formality of the TRL, which is fairly rigid. So actually we started off with just SQL because we liked it so much. And then a lot of customers said, no, but my client wants to know that everything is at TRL level. So we had to go back and add the TRL, and we just accepted it from the vendor.